Welcome into the 14. This is the Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell joins me. Barry Allen joins me. We're going to talk mostly baseball today, and I think we're going to do a fun exercise that people will enjoy. But first of all, Blake, you're going to be a short-termer on the pod today because of another pod you've got to do. But I want you to start because we've got some big battles in Starkville that we've not gotten around to so far.
Well, yeah, it's just kind of compiled at this point based on, we've talked about Mississippi State a lot, the sophomore group they had last year, very talented. And now, those guys become upperclassmen, and now they add some good talent around it. We just completely forgot to mention it, that I think it was Friday, maybe last Friday. Garrison Brooks, who we had talked about before, I had said, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't choose Mississippi State after transferring from North Carolina. He made it official on Friday. So that's obviously a big addition, quite literally, when you think about a guy that's, 6'10", 240 or so. That's significant for them to have him, back there, and just, someone with that kind of size. And we talk about the rest of the roster that they're going to have. That gives them a pretty significant size element there. And then, to add DJ Jeffries, who comes over from Memphis. He was someone as well that I think, that's a nice addition for them in terms of kind of building what they're going to be able to do and be able to, I think, really, have an opportunity here. I mean, Jeffries and Brooks, both those guys were top, talents. I mean, you look at kind of the recruiting and all that, and obviously, you have the Garrison Brooks connection with his dad on the coaching staff, and then Jeffries from Olive Branch, and there's just lots of things like that. So I think Ben Hallen's been able to sort of take advantage and realize that, hey, keeping some of those guys there in state and getting some of those guys back like they've done, that's a good thing. And I think that now you kind of look at their roster. I mean, Jeffries, averaged about 10 points, 5 rebounds last year at Memphis. Played a lot. I mean, he played 25 minutes. I mean, he's someone that's really the past couple of years has played a lot of minutes in his first 2 seasons in college. So, I mean, I think that this is going to be one to where, again, I try not to just throw out top 25s and stuff unless you're just completely sure. But I think you look at this Mississippi State roster, and you've got to think that they're going to be right there with an opportunity. They should be an NCAA tournament team, barring any defections at this point. But I just think that it's a pretty talented group that he's put together there. And as we said, when you think about the sophomore group they had this past season with Molinar, Smith, and who am I forgetting? Stewart.
Stewart.
Yeah, Stewart. So those three, that's a pretty good group there. And so, I think Mississippi State's going to be back in pretty good shape next season.
Yeah, State was a team where the pieces just didn't add up. Or I guess a better way to say it is I felt like they added up to less than the sum of the parts. You and I had our ongoing differing takes on that team, and I think that's the best way to explain it. But now you look, and they seem to have a little bit of everything heading into next year. I mean, that's 5 pieces off the bat that I really like, Blake.
Yeah, and that's, they were young last year, right? And that's what we talked about, sort of the experience, because they were relying on 3 sophomores. And, they had Abdul Adu, and I don't know that I've seen Abdul Adu. I don't know if he's even decided yet on what he's going to do. I don't know. Again, it's hard to kind of project on some of those, whether he could come back or not. I'm not sure, but maybe someone else may know. We've already seen it. Again, it's hard to keep up with all this, but I think any way you slice it, having those guys, and then they're going to add 3 recruits too to the mix that are kind of all guys around sort of top 150 in the country in terms of just recruiting. Their recruiting class right now is ranked 42nd, which is not bad. That's 10th in the SEC, but we got to remember too, right, that the SEC's got a lot of guys that have kind of pushed into the top 10 based on some of the signings. But adding Jeffries, adding Brooks, those are significant. And then when you put them with the guys that they already had there, I think Mississippi State has all of a sudden sort of jumped up into one of those teams that could really be a top 25 team next season.
Any other basketball news before we flip it to baseball?
I was looking in the transfer portal, which your daily update up to 1,406 at this point. So I think we will eclipse that 1,500 mark there. Quez Glover, who was at Florida, he went to Samford. Anything else? I'm trying to look. Jackson Robinson, who was at Texas A&M, he's decided to transfer, so that's another sort of exit for the Aggies. That's a team that, boy, I start to look ahead. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to look like next season. That's one that I think we talked about it yesterday. They certainly feel like a bottom tier team heading into next season. But other than that, I think it's still just wait and see how many guys leave, how many guys come in, and still pretty early in terms of trying to figure out what these teams are going to look like just because we don't know what the rosters are going to be yet just yet.
Right now, are A&M, Georgia, and maybe Missouri the three front runners for the for last place or for a for the
Yeah,
Thursday game
I feel like it's
or the Wednesday game, excuse me, in the tournament?
I do,
Yes.
yeah, I do feel like it's A&M probably at this point. I think that they're. I mean, I just look if we just compare them right now. I think A&M's roster just leaves a lot to be desired at this point. Missouri, they're still one that I think again probably going to be a month or so before we have a true feel of what their roster is going to be. Georgia, as you said, and we talked about before, I think there's still some unknowns with them too. So yeah, I think that's those are kind of teams right now, and it's just a matter of how do you fill the rest of your roster. And there's some other teams too, kind of in the middle there that maybe still don't have a great feel for. I mean, Ole Miss is one that I just don't yet have a great feel for what they're going to look like. So other teams like that, it's just it's due. I mean, Vanderbilt, right? We talked about them. To where until Scottie Pippen makes his decision, you kind of know now. You have a better idea, but that's still a big one out there. So yeah, still a lot to be determined on those.
Yeah, I think South Carolina would be in that mix
Yeah,
too.
I
Not
forgot
sure
about
where
them.
this is headed.
AJ
Yeah, I
Lawson
did too.
signed yesterday and entered with an
Oh,
agent, so I don't know if again that's that they can do that now, right? There's no that they're allowed to do that. So whether he comes back, I'm not sure, but he at least is going to go back into that process. So
well, Blake, I guess we'll flip to baseball if you're done here.
yes,
So,
yeah, not much else on the basketball front, and so yeah, I know lots of baseball to talk about. So
Barry Allen, let's talk baseball. Big weekend for the SEC. They're all big weekends. What stood out to you the most?
Well, I think one thing that stood out just Vanderbilt getting back on track. I thought they played really well in Knoxville against a really hostile environment. I think Tennessee's created a really good atmosphere at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. I mean, I've been there a bunch of times. I've never seen a crowd like that. I mean, I've never, ever gone to Knoxville and thought, well, they're going to have 5,000 people here. Most of the time I've gone up there and go, well, are they going to have 500 tonight or 300 or whatever? But for Vanderbilt to be able to pitch and hit the way they did, and I thought Sunday, that's kind of the iffy game for Vanderbilt in the series. With not obviously no one has a starter like Leiter and Rocker, but they've had some issues on Sunday, and I think Enrique Bradfield Jr. just took over the game, and they were really good with two outs, and he was a part of that. I think he had a 2-out single in the third inning when they're behind 2-1. He gets a 2-out base hit, steals second, steals third, scores on a hit, and I think he gets a 2-out base hit, drives in a run in another inning, then follow that up with a home run, and steals 2 walks and steals 2 bases in his next trip to the plate, and scores on a pop up to short, sacrifice fly to the shortstop in very, very shallow left center field. And I think he just took over the game, and he really stood out to be this weekend in his play. Mississippi State and Ole Miss was the series we thought we would get, and we got it. High drama, big leverage situations in all the games. And, Doug Nikhazy pitched the game of this, other than Leiter, probably the game of the season in the SEC. You got Leiter's no-hitter, and then you got Doug Nikhazy's one-hitter at Mississippi State. So that was a huge mark for them. And then their comeback, Mississippi State's comeback on Sunday with Tanner Allen's 3-run triple off Taylor Broadway in the 6th inning. That shows you how big that game was to Mike Bianco and Ole Miss. They brought their closer in with 2 outs in the 6th, and he misses with 2 fastballs. Misses first 2 pitches are out of the zone, so he's got a 2-0 pitch, and he just kind of left a fastball right out over the middle of the plate, and Tanner Allen didn't miss it and drilled it into the right center field gap for a 3-run triple. And that they had tremendous crowds, 35,000, I think, for the weekend after Ole Miss had put 33,000 in their stadium the week before. And then the the other series that kind of jumped out was the drama that Auburn and Alabama had in their series. I've seen that many times. That's not anything unusual. I've lived that firsthand, and that's not anything unusual. But 3-1 run games, 2 walk-offs by Alabama. Auburn felt like they probably could have been 3-0, and Alabama felt like they probably could have been 3-0 in that series. And there's just a lot of drama and a lot of tension. Not bad, just a lot of. I mean, it's 3 well-played games, and I think both teams played really hard all weekend long. And in the end, it came down to what we said it was going to come down to: whose bullpen was better, and Alabama's bullpen was better. Auburn couldn't hold them down Thursday night with a lead. They did Friday night, but they couldn't hold them down Saturday with a lead either. Alabama rallied from 4 different deficits in that game to win, and again, Auburn bullpen, let them down. And then South Carolina, another one, kind of jumped out. They lose the opener, they get rained out on Friday, and they're down 2-0 in the 7th inning, which is the last inning of the Saturday doubleheader because it's the getaway day. They can only play 2 sevens. They're down 2-0 in the 7th inning. They get a 2-run double by Wimmer and a 2-run double by Brady Allen. Hey, there's our man Brady Allen again. And then they win that game 4-2, and then they scored 9-0 in the second game. So in the last 8 innings of the series, they outscored LSU, 13-0, and ended up winning that series. It's really amazing to me for South Carolina how they've played so well. This year. They lost their first series to Vanderbilt, but in the first 5 weeks, they've lost the first game of the series 4 times, and 3 of those 4 times they've won the series. The only one they didn't win was Vanderbilt. So they're able to bounce back. They've done that each of the last 3 weeks now. They've done it against Georgia, Missouri, and LSU. And so that's kind of an uncanny thing for the Gamecocks, to drop that first one, but they can come back and win games 2 and 3. And if somehow they get into a super regional and they get stuffed in the first game, they've got experience coming back and winning the next 2 games. And I think that helps them as the season rolls along.
Power rankings were not easy to do this week. I put mine out yesterday for the teams, and I think Arkansas is the one, Vandy's the 2 at this point. I don't think that's probably a lot of debate on those, but I think the next 5, Mississippi State, Tennessee, South Carolina, Ole Miss, or maybe the next 4. Well, you probably would say the next 5 because I think you would have Florida higher than I would. I think ranking those teams is terribly difficult right now.
I think it is. I mean, you and I talked about it Sunday night, bantering back and forth about who's, which teams should be here and which teams should be here. But it's really difficult to look at, these teams, top 4, even top 6, maybe even top 7, and kind of see who should be ranked higher than the other. And I think we kind of take into consideration, who they've played each other. So I think that has to be considered, and, where they've played teams and who they've played and who they've beaten and where they've beaten them, comes in too. But I think it's Arkansas, Vandy, right now the top 2, and then, South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi State's all 10-5, and all 3 have good qualities, and all 3 have some things that didn't help them. Mississippi State's been swept at home by Arkansas, which is not a knock on them because Arkansas's we consider the best team, and they're the unanimous number 1. But this week was really tricky with that first 5 or 6 teams, and trying to get them in the power rankings, and even in the bottom half, the 8, 9, 10, was a little bit of a trick as well, trying to get those teams, in the right order. And, hopefully we did. But it's hard to do that on a week by week basis. And, just looking at, the whole body of work for teams, and, it helps that we see them play and see them come back. I mean, we've talked about Arkansas, you and I have talked about them. Their starting pitching just doesn't jump off the page at you. And you go, well, how can they be better than Vanderbilt when they don't have a rocker and a lighter? And they don't. And their starting pitching has not been great for them. And their bullpen has carried them, mainly Kevin Kopps. They do get Nolan back. He came back this weekend, who's been injured, and he's back. So I think that will help them a little bit. But these guys just find a way to win. I mean, they've trailed They have 9 come from behind wins where they've trailed by 3 runs or more. And they almost did it again Sunday against the Aggies. I mean, they're down 10-4, and they get a 3-run homer from Goodhart and a 3-run homer from Gregory. And this sucker's 11-10 going to the 9th inning. And the A&M pitcher walks the first 2 guys on 8 pitches. And then Arkansas bunted, gave up an out. I understand that. Probably would have done that myself, but gave up an out. And then they intentionally walked more. So then the game's in their hand with Goodhart and Wallace, and they bring Josiak in the game for A&M, and he strikes out both guys, and they lose 11-10. But they're always in the game. They find a way to win. Their lineup is so good. And if they're starting pitching, I saw a tweet yesterday, if Arkansas starting pitching improves any, look out. I mean, I think they have a chance to win the whole thing. I think their offense and their defense is that good. And Vanderbilt is as well, because they've got the 2 guys on the mound that are going to probably go 1-2 in the draft. And so I think for us, those 2 teams are clearly 1 and 2. And then the next 3 are pretty, I think it really could go in any order.
I was doing some work on a team level last night. I'm going to pull this up as we're talking here. Hang on. This is basically, I was looking, because I think one thing that's interesting is sometimes you have some fluke games. Sometimes you have some bad luck, those sorts of things. And I was going back and sorting through all the SEC stats for the year. Hang on just a minute, and I will pull this up. But it is crazy how far in front Vanderbilt's pitching is in terms of runners allowed per inning. Okay, I'm just going to I wanted to sort these in order, but I've screwed this up. So I'll just give them to you as I've got them on the page. Base runners per inning in SEC games. Vanderbilt 1.07. Mississippi State 1.35, Arkansas 1.46, Florida 1.32, South Carolina 1.32, Tennessee 1.34, Ole Miss 1.44, Georgia 1.60, LSU 1.60, Alabama 1.70, Kentucky 1.55, A&M 1.68, Auburn 1.71, and Missouri 1.93. Basically, Vanderbilt at 1.07. The next place teams in the league are Florida and South Carolina at 1.32. Now, we knew Vanderbilt had good pitching, right? But we also thought other teams did too. That is astonishing how far out in front Vanderbilt is of the other teams in the league in that stat.
Yeah, it really is. And it shows how good Leiter and Rocker are. And it also shows that, I think one of the commentators said on television this weekend, the other Vanderbilt pitchers aren't bad. I mean, they're just not Rocker and Leiter. I mean, it's not like they're running guys out there and go, oh God, I hope he can give us a couple of innings and whatever. I mean, that's just how dominant these 2 guys are. For Vanderbilt, I'd like to see what the runners per inning are versus Leiter and Rocker versus the rest of the team. But I think even overall, McIlvain pitched well Sunday. Maldonado has pitched well. Murphy has had some good moments. So I think overall their pitching staff is really good. I think other teams have had good pitching staffs as well. South Carolina comes to mind with, Farr and Bosnick and Carey and Sanders that have done really well. And, I think Tennessee's probably been a little bit better on the mound than most people think. Florida might not have been as solid on the mound as most people think. In fact, going against Ole Miss a few weeks ago, they went bullpen, then starters. That worked for, Mace a couple of times. He was back in the starting rotation this weekend, and he did pitch well against Missouri. And they knocked him out of the game in the 5th inning, and Jack Leftwich came in. And that's probably this last week's probably the best week Jack Leftwich has had all year long, and might be the best week Jack Leftwich has ever had as a Florida Gator. He had 2 bullpen wins against Florida State and Missouri. He pitched 8 innings. He gave up 0 hits. He struck out 9, and he retired 24 of the 25 batters he faced this week. He had 1 walk in the 8 innings that he pitched, and held the Noles off the board so Callie Lau could hit the walk-off homer Tuesday and then settle the game down, and Florida was able to win the game with Missouri and clinch the series. So he's got a extra inning win over Florida State and a series clinching win over Missouri in 8 shutout hitless innings this week. That may be the best Jack Leftwich has pitched certainly this year and maybe as a Florida Gator.
Yeah, I noticed that too. This is kind of becoming the year of the super reliever in the league because you got Landon Sims at Mississippi State and Kevin Kopps, who've just been unbelievable in those roles so far. Leftwich, I don't think is as overpowering, but he's kind of been that guy for Florida. Brett Carey is that guy for South Carolina. You see those guys here and there. Nick Maldonado, here's a fun fact you can win a bar bet with. Nick Maldonado has allowed fewer base runners per innings pitched and has a better ERA than either Lighter or Rocker, and he's kind of Vandy's guy for that. He may not go 4 or 5 innings like some of those other kids can go, but it has really been eye-popping to see how many teams in this league have got a guy who can do that.
Well, there's a lot of them. You talk about Brett Carey at South Carolina, Kirk Connell at Tennessee, that lefty that comes in, that big sweeping breaking ball, and then, Hundley, from the right side, and, Leftwich has been good out of the pen. Christian Scott has pitched in relief, but has now has started some now, but I think back in the bullpen a little bit for Florida. You mentioned Kevin Kopps, Landon Sims, Taylor Broadway. Seems like Taylor Broadway pitches every day. Chase Lee at Alabama finally gave up a run this week against Auburn, but he's got, I think, 5 wins and 5 saves for Alabama this year. So you got these guys that are, these, I guess you call them rubber arm guys, super relievers you call, and there's a lot of guys with that, and there's a lot of value to that in this league. You got to have a guy to come in the game, and you look at the teams that are 2-13 and 4-11 and stuff, and they don't have that guy. Auburn hadn't established that guy, and come in when like Mike Bianco, Sunday, their base is loaded and 2 outs in the 6th inning, and he brings his closer in the game. Well, he may not need that guy in the 9th inning, and that's when you got to come in and close the game. And he brings Broadway into the game, and he was willing to use him for 10 outs, and he did, but he didn't get Tanner Allen out in the 6th inning, and Mississippi State got 3 runs, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But I guarantee you the next time the game's on the line, Taylor Broadway is going to be in the game for Ole Miss because he's done it way more times than he hadn't done it. And these super relievers are really valuable to these teams.
Yeah, and another guy that I don't know that he goes as long as some of these other guys, but Andrew Peters at South Carolina has been dominant. You talked about Ole Miss. I look at the parts and I still don't understand this, right? Because you got maybe 2 of the best 5 or 6 starters in the league, and Nikhazy and Hoagland. You got Drew McDaniel and Broadway are guys that have thrown really well over long stints. I don't really understand why Ole Miss's pitching has not been better than it's been, Barry.
Yeah. Nikhazy was hurt, missed a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? I mean, that's certainly part of it, but even then it doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And they haven't really settled in on that Sunday guy. They went with Diamond for a long time, and that didn't work. And they made a change, last weekend, and he pitched well. I mean, they've got the lead. Leatherwood's 2 home runs. Ole Miss has got the lead, but yeah, it's just. They've had position injuries, which does not affect the pitching staff whatsoever. But it is kind of puzzling to, see Hoagland and Nikhazy and Broadway and McDaniel and some of these guys and veteran guys, Miller, veteran guys, and it just doesn't seem like they've quite, gotten. I don't want to say everything out of them that they can. I don't want to say that, but. it's just something just seems like it's not there for them this year, on the mound. And I don't know how to put how to put a finger on it either. I don't know what's not there for them. And Casey's numbers are really good. Hogland's numbers are really good. And McDaniel's numbers have been really good for them this year. But it just, after that, it just kind of falls off a little bit. Other than Broadway, and he's got 8 saves and 3 wins, and less hits than innings pitched. But just as a whole, it just doesn't seem like it's been quite there. I mean, their ERA is almost 4 for the season, but there's just something there that just doesn't quite register like you would think Ole Miss has had on the mound in the past. And I can't put my finger on it, and maybe Mike Bianco can't either, and that's why they continue to do what they do. But it can turn around for them, I think, and they can still get where they want to go. But it's going to have to go on the mound, and it's going to have to be that number 3 starter that picks things up a little bit for them, and maybe making that switch with McDaniel from Diamond to McDaniel last week. Maybe that'll be a surge that'll help them.
I'm going to give you one more interesting thing, okay? Because I think that we got different components to pitching. The theory these days is you look at the true outcomes: walks, strikeouts, and home runs. I would add hit by pitches to that because that's a bigger deal in college ball. Vanderbilt has issued a free pass rate of 12%. Mississippi State has been 11%. Vanderbilt struck out 32% of its hitters. State has struck out 31%. Vanderbilt's allowed 4.0% of hitters to hit home runs. This is all in league play. That's the worst mark in the league. Mississippi State has given up 3.8%. So almost identical pitching staffs there. Yet Vandy has given up 1.07 runners per inning. State's given up 1.35. And the difference is batting average on balls in play. Now, sometimes that's a luck thing, and sometimes that is a thing where there's a lot of balls hit really hard. Vanderbilt's 204, State's is 305. You've got 2 identical pitching staffs, basically, in terms of the 3 true outcomes. Yet because of that, Vanderbilt has got a 3.22 ERA, and State is at 4.57 in the league. That's crazy to look at and see the difference, because the 3 inputs there, like I said, are almost identical. It is one team is seeing a lot more balls drop in play and the other's not. Now, I don't know, again, if that's luck or defense or the fact that you got Leiter and Rocker on the hill, and when you make contact, a lot of times it's just not very hard. But I don't know how you account for the difference there, but that is really astonishing when you look at it on paper, Barry.
Yeah, it really is. And I think Rocker Leiter has a lot to do with that. And not criticizing who Vanderbilt's played, early in the season, because Georgia batted them around pretty good. But, Vanderbilt's played South Carolina, Missouri, LSU, Georgia, and Tennessee, where Mississippi State has played LSU, Arkansas, Kentucky, Auburn, and Ole Miss. They have played the 2 best teams in their division. Vanderbilt, I guess you could say, has done the same thing. I mean, it looks like their schedule's fairly close. They both played LSU, and, Vanderbilt swept LSU. Mississippi State did not, lost, but Vanderbilt, both of them on the road. Really looking at that, maybe that that series had something to do with it. Mississippi State swept Kentucky at home. Vanderbilt plays Kentucky at home the last weekend, but I think maybe it's just, the 2 guys are just so more dominant. I think Mississippi State also went a while where they weren't really settled in on their, they've had McLeod in the 1 spot all year, but they hadn't really been settled in on 2 and 3 all year long. They moved Sarantola out of the pen, back to the pen, and brought Bednar in, and then, they moved Fristow out of the rotation, who'd been on the Sunday deal for a couple of weeks, and then they've put him back, and they've got a lot of depth, so they can play with things and have a lot of options. And where Vanderbilt's going Rocker Leiter every weekend, Mississippi State hadn't done that with their number ones. Only McLeod has been the guy that's answered the bell in the number 1 spot all year long. So that may also have something to do with it. And I think luck and just, it's just not your night. and it's just the other team's night. I said, I think sometimes that has a lot to do with it too. And an old scout for the Milwaukee Brewers told me one time, Red Whitsitt, he was covered this area, and he was also friends with John Guthrie, so he was like a timeout coordinator in basketball and traveled to basketball games and would do the timeout coordinator stuff for television. And he once told me that you're going to win a third of your games no matter what, and you're going to lose a third of your games no matter what. It's how you handle the other third that decides if you're going to make the playoffs or not. And I think that's true. I mean, I think there's, you play 30 games, you're probably going to win 10 and lose 10. It's those other 10 games that determines if you're going to Hoover or host a regional or make a regional or host a super regional and get to Omaha with a record. That I think that still rings true even today. And I think all of those things you mentioned, all those factors, I think play into that a little bit.
You would probably know this better than I do. Sometimes when you change ballparks around, and the reason I'm asking this is Vanderbilt has played 2 series at home. Hawkins Field is generally a pitcher's park. Dudy Noble, how has that played ever since they made all the architectural changes and some things like that? Because sometimes you just change some things around the park that changes wind patterns and things. Is that playing as a pitcher's or a hitter's park these days?
That's a good question. I know I think they have less foul territory down both lines than they did in the past because they have the berms where the people sit on the grass, and they kind of have these circular cutouts down the lines where they didn't have that before. And I think the wind is probably the same. The wind pattern is probably the same there. It's a little bit bigger park than some other places. Looking at down the lines and at center field, I know Vanderbilt has the monster. It's a short porch to left, but it has the monster. But that seems to me like Dudy Noble's always played big. They were never really a team that was going to hit 85 to 100 home runs. They were going to hit a lot of doubles and triples. But it always seemed to me like that park played big, and I think it still kind of plays that way now. But every now and then the wind can have a factor over there, and balls jump out of there. I mean, I know there was. Arkansas liked it. They hit 9 home runs in 3 games. They were comfortable. And I think Ole Miss hit their share this weekend too. So I think that plays a part into it as well. But I don't think it's ever been a really home run friendly kind of park all the time. But I think the wind can certainly play a factor over there, and the balls can get out of there, when the wind is blowing. But typically it's been a big park, and I think that's benefited their pitching more than anything else. But I know now they've cut down on the foul territory, and that certainly helps.
Yeah, Vanderbilt has no foul territory to speak of. About as little as you'll ever see. But this one is interesting. Okay, this is per Wikipedia. I've seen different dimensions, and I saw one on the official school site, but I'm trying I'm not sure what year this is or was updated. Wikipedia says left field in Dudy Noble 330, left center 376, center 390, right 374, right center 374, and right 305. Now if that's right, the ball's really going to get out of there in a hurry, and that explains a lot of reason. We've talked about how Mississippi State's given up a lot of home runs this year. Well, with dimensions like that, of course it has, right?
Sure. I mean, 305 down the line. Now, Vandy, to left field is 310, but they have the 30-foot wall. I think Auburn's 310, but they've got the monster as well. So that cuts that out. But 305. I mean, you're talking like old Salem Municipal Stadium, where the Pirates used to have an A-ball team in Salem, Virginia. It was 305 down the line. But I went to a game there one time, and the radio announcer goes, "Well, that's really measured from like up here. It's probably like 290 or 285." And he said, "We have a lot of balls get out of here down the line." So you're looking at, a left-hand hitter's paradise, to right field on a short porch. And I think the wind plays a factor there. We're talking about foul territory. You're talking about, Vanderbilt has literally none, and I think Mississippi State's cut theirs down. And I don't know if you've ever been to Stanford in Palo Alto.
I have actually.
They may have the most foul territory of anybody. I mean, I think you could play touch football down the line during a baseball game and you would never get hit by a baseball. I remember sitting in the dugout when Alabama went to a regional there one year and sitting with Jim Wells, and he goes, "My God, it's going to take me an hour to get to the mound." He goes, "It's like 5 miles." I go, "Coach, it's 5 miles to the line. Then you got to go to the mound." He goes, "I'll never get out there." I said, "Well, good. Don't change your pictures like you do. Games will go faster." But I mean, it was like like literally you couldn't see the mound from the dugout. It was so far away. There's so much foul territory, at Stanford. Some places are like that, and some places are not, but certainly not at Vanderbilt. And I think Mississippi State has decreased their foul territory quite a bit as well.
Okay, I think Wikipedia was bringing some misinformation because I'm looking on the official site. I finally found it. It says right field 326. I think the others are right. So that's a little better. Like, I was watching in Knoxville this weekend. It's 320 down the line to right, and balls were getting out of there pretty quickly. And you talked about Vandy. Every time I'm in that park, there's a stiff breeze blowing out to either center or to left. So that's one of those where sometimes you get a breeze in that park that helps you a little bit too. But it does seem like some of the parks are maybe playing home run friendly so far.
Yeah, the weather has been better. I think earlier this year than normal. It hadn't been quite as cold. Although
we haven't had a rain out yet, which is unusual.
No, that's true. And
I mean, we've had games postponed, but they've gotten them all in, and that's not always a given, right?
That's right. That's not always a given, and we haven't had any canceled due to something else either. We're not going to say what that word is, but we haven't had any games canceled for that either, and that's good. So we're 5 weeks in, and everybody's played the full complement of SEC games. I think our weather's been better. It's been a little warmer. I think we are in for a little cool snap the next couple of days. I know we are down here. I think they're talking the snow word up in Tennessee and Kentucky, maybe tomorrow and possibly Thursday, but just as a little front moves through. And then I think this weekend's supposed to be really wet here. I don't know that Auburn will play Saturday in their game with Florida. That may be a Sunday doubleheader, 2 7 innings. I don't know if they'll get that one in, but it's still a couple of days away to determine that. But yeah, our weather has been pretty good this spring, and we've been very fortunate, with a lot of high 60s and to high 70s and low 80s with a lot of sunshine. And I think that helps, I think that helps the hitters as well. You're not up there trying to hit a 95 mile an hour fastball when it's, 36 degrees and the wind's blowing in and little pellets of rain are hitting you in the head as you're trying to bat. I think that's been a big factor too.
Yeah, it's like a rule here in Nashville. If there's a home series at Vanderbilt, there's going to be rain. It hasn't happened this year so much so far, but I'm looking Saturday because I'm going to go to Vandy, Mississippi State, a couple of those. 90% chance of rain for Saturday.
Yeah, I think Saturday is if you're in the Southeast, and I think maybe even Lexington, Alabama may be in trouble at as far north as Lexington, but there's supposed to be a lot of rain on Saturday. We'll just maybe a lot of Sunday doubleheaders trying to get caught up from the weekend. But I know here Saturday's like an 80% chance of rain, and Sunday 74 and sunny with no problems at all. So I think we just got to navigate one day this weekend and maybe have one bad weather day, and the other two or Thursday too. Three out of the 4 days would be pretty good weather for the hitters.
All right, guys, I'm jumping in here. There were some internet issues, and Chris and Barry had to wrap up the podcast a little early. They were going to get into some other stuff on SEC baseball, but they're going to do that on Thursday's episode of the podcast. They're going to project the standings in SEC baseball and have some fun with that. But they'll do that on Thursday's episode. We will have Wednesday's episode. Me and Chris talking about lots of other things around the SEC. So for now, be sure to check out everything over at southeastern14.com. Lots of notes over there on baseball, as we talked about football yesterday, basketball. It's all there at the site, so check that out. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast on any podcast app you use. Search for Southeastern 14 or the 14. You can find us there, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at 14 Southeastern. So thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast, and we will talk to you again on Wednesday's episode of 14.